What if one day you wake up to the news that President of the United States has been assassinated, and simultaneously in some other city, Vice President is taken as hostage by unknown group after a fierce fight with the Secret Service protecting the Vice President? Few minutes later, another news breaks that a submarine of a hostile country carrying nuclear missiles has been detected some 370 miles off the coast of United States, and a nuclear strike on America is imminent. Now that the president is dead and vice president is a hostage, who will assume the charge as president, ensure the continuity of government and authorize a nuclear retaliation? The Constitution provides that when both the President and Vice President cannot discharge the powers and duties of the office of the President, the Congress shall provide the law stating who is next in line. In this regard, Congress passed First Presidential Succession Act of 1792, which said the President pro tempore of the United States Senate was next in line of succession after the Vice President, followed by the Speaker of the House of Representatives. After the death of Vice President Thomas A. Hendricks in 1885, a new Presidential Succession Act of 1886 was adopted, replacing the President pro tempore of the United States Senate, and the Speaker of the House of Representatives, on the list with the members of the Presidential Cabinet. The order of succession was determined by the order in which each cabinet department had been created, with the Secretary of State being first in line after the Vice President. Shortly after President Franklin D. Roosevelt's death, President Harry S. Truman lobbied for a revision of the law, and consequently the Presidential Succession Act of 1947 was passed. The act restored the congressional officers to places directly after the Vice President, but switched their order from the 1792 Act, placing the Speaker of the House first, and the President pro tempore second. The Presidential Cabinet Secretaries and officers then followed, again in the order in which their respective departments were created. Currently, the Presidential Succession Act of 1947 is in effect, and it says that after the Vice President, the Speaker of the House of Representatives shall, upon his resignation as Speaker and as representative in Congress, act as President. If there is no Speaker, or the Speaker fails to qualify as acting President, then the President pro tempore of the Senate shall, upon his resignation as President pro tempore, and as Senator, act as President. The Presidential Succession Act of 1947 also says that the Speaker or President pro tempore shall continue to act until the expiration of the then current presidential term, unless they assumed the charge due to the failure of both President-elect and Vice President-elect to qualify. Then they will act as President until the President or Vice President qualifies, or they assume charge due to any inability of President and Vice President. They will continue to act as President until that disability is removed. Now, if by reason of death, resignation, removal from office, inability, or failure to qualify, there is no President pro tempore to act as President, then the following officers, who is highest on the following list, and who is not under disability to discharge the powers and duties of the office of President, shall act as President. They are: Secretary of State, Secretary of the Treasury, Secretary of Defense, Attorney General, Secretary of the Interior, Secretary of Agriculture, Secretary of Commerce, Secretary of Labor, Secretary of Health and Human Services, Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Secretary of Transportation, Secretary of Energy, Secretary of Education, Secretary of Veterans Affairs, Secretary of Homeland Security. The only exception to the line provided in the law states that, to ascend to the presidency, the next person in line must be constitutionally eligible. Any person holding an office in the line of succession who, for example, is not a naturally born citizen, cannot become president. In this case, that person would be skipped, and the next eligible person in the line would become president. Furthermore, an individual acting as president shall continue to do so until the expiration of the then current presidential term, but not after a qualified and prior entitled individual is able to act. During Cold War, when risk of nuclear attack on United States was high, a practice of designated survivor or designated successor was introduced. A designated survivor or designated successor is an individual in the presidential line of succession, usually a member of the United States cabinet, who is arranged to be at a physically distant, secure, and undisclosed location when the president and the country's other top leaders, for example, vice president and cabinet members, are gathered at a single location, such as during State of the Union addresses and presidential inaugurations. This is intended to guarantee the continuity of government in the event of a catastrophic occurrence that kills the president and many officials in the presidential line of succession, such as a mass shooting, bombing or attack. If such an event occurred, killing both the president and vice president, the surviving official highest in the line, possibly the designated survivor, would become the acting president of the United States under the Presidential Succession Act. The designated survivor is provided with presidential-level security and transport for the duration of the event. An aide carries a nuclear football with them. However, they are not given a briefing on what to do in the event when the other successors to the presidency are killed. Since 2005, members of Congress have also served as a designated survivors. In the event that all of their colleagues were killed, a surviving representative and a senator could ascend to the offices of Speaker of the House and President pro tempore of the Senate, offices that immediately follow the vice president in the line of succession. If such a legislative survivor were the sitting speaker or president pro tempore, he or she would become the acting president rather than the surviving cabinet member. During the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks, several people holding offices in the line of succession, among them Speaker Dennis Hastert and Senate President pro tempore Robert Byrd, were taken to secure locations in order to guarantee that at least one officer in the line of succession would survive the attacks. During the inauguration of President Barack Obama, the Bush and Obama transition teams agreed to name Secretary of Defense Robert Gates as the designated successor, and he was taken to a secure location instead of attending the ceremony. One might ask as to why presidential succession is so necessary? Why the post of president can't remain vacant? The answer is that President as Chief Executive and Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Armed Forces has many powers vested in him, and there must be someone to exercise those powers at any given time in order to steer through the crisis. One example of such power is the use of nuclear weapons. Only the President can direct the use of nuclear weapons. No other person in the United States has such authority, so in case of nuclear strike, if the President dies, there must be someone else to assume the charge of the office of the President and authorize nuclear strike and defend the nation. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you liked the information provided in this video. If you want us to improve the quality of our videos, and want us to frequently create more videos, then please consider supporting us at Patreon. The link is in the description. Thanks again, and please don't forget to like, subscribe and share. Have a great day.